President Trump has much to brag about, but his most lasting achievement may be the least discussed, reshaping the courts with hundreds of judges and still more to come. I'm Hayden Ludwig. Despite the left's campaign of scorched earth lawfare, conservatives have steadily racked up an impressive array of court victories over the past decade, courtesy of both Trump administrations. And more than a few of them have saved the republic from certain doom. Here to shine a light on the judiciary is Michael Thielen, president of the Republican National Lawyers Association and one of the leading experts on our courts. Michael, thank you for joining Restoration Spotlight.
Glad to be here.
I want to start with the most recent article in Real Clear Politics out recently. So as we know, the Biden administration relied heavily on auto pen signatures for numerous bills and executive orders over those last 4 years. Now we're learning that the administration may have used the auto pen to sign orders Biden didn't even know about. One example is halting exports of liquefied natural gas to Europe in January 2024. But it may also include granting a preemptive pardon to Anthony Fauci. Now, Michael, this sounds to me like the makings of a constitutional crisis. Your thoughts?
Well, that's exactly it. Now, the auto pen has been used to sign legislation. Obama did that, and that's one level of controversy, but that's more procedural controversy. This is something completely different because this is, did the president even know that he signed it? Who was running the White House? And those aren't constitutional things necessarily. And what makes the Fauci thing especially significant is Fauci's was a preemptive pardon, which is kind of a gray area as well. So you have one clearly not legal for, the president has to know what he's signing or what was signed, and the fact that it was also a preemptive pardon, which is kind of a gray area. Can you preemptively pardon somebody? There's disagreement on that, but there is people who say you can do it. So you add those two up. I think Fauci has reasons to be concerned and should be concerned.
Well, it also paints a picture of a party that doesn't give a fig about the Constitution at all. I mean, we can just go back to how the entire COVID fiasco was handled. The influence of China in changing some of our procedures in response to the pandemic, for instance. And you add it all up, you have an administration that it seems to me is basically admitting they may have broken the law here and are trying to get out ahead of that, maybe by extra constitutional or extra legal means.
Oh, yes. And that's also the legacy media. They covered for this. They knew They had to know Biden was not all there. They had to know there was questions about Biden. And the only time they brought those questions up was when it became apparent that Biden was going to lose the next general election. And the COVID example is great because Senator Cotton literally said this is done in a lab. And not only was Cotton not allowed to say that on Twitter and such or derided or, called a kook and conspiracy person, they wouldn't even admit that they were wrong now. They're still doing this. They're still talking about this. And, it happened. And we should get to the bottom of it. And a preemptive pardon was one way to stop this from happening.
So preemptive pardons, of course, are one thing. But as you point out in this Real Clear Politics article, the use of an auto pen by the president to sign legislation or executive orders, it's not new. It's not like this goes back 100 years. This goes back to the Obama administration. Is that right?
Right. And that's the thing is the left will argue that, hey, Obama did it, but Obama knew what he was signing. Obama was in Hawaii. Obama was on vacation. Obama was overseas. And that's when he used the auto pen when a deadline hit. That's very different from this case when we don't know who actually decided to put that signature on paper. And the LNG case you started with, President Biden did not know he signed it.
Yes, he said as much. I didn't do that.
Right. And and New York Times said he did not know all the people he pardoned. There were categories of people he pardoned. Well, what did he really know and what did he not know? That's a big issue. Obviously, the Hunter Biden pardon is valid because he knew he was pardoning Hunter. That was with his own signature. Why did they not put these other one past him? He could sign it for Hunter. Why couldn't he sign it for other people? So there's real questions here, and it's very different than when President Obama did it, which was a procedural violation, and lawyers can get into that. This is a serious policy issue.
All right, so skeptics, playing devil's advocate here would say, well, is it really that different, though? It's all done under the same presidential administration and authority. It's still the same name. Does it really matter if it was some functionary who did the actual auto pen signing or if it was the actual president himself? What difference does it really make? What's your response?
Well, that's why the Johnson LNG story is so important because Biden denied signing that. So in other words, the president, if he was with it, would not sign that. I mean, Biden also got mad at Transgender Day at Easter, famously, It was as if he didn't know it. So maybe he didn't know that proclamation when it was signed. There's a number of things like that. Biden may not have known, and the president has to decide these things. That's why he has the pardon power. It's not the attorney general. It's not any other official. It's not the chief of staff. It's certainly not the White House spouse. It's the president. So that brings into question the legality of all these kinds of actions.
So in other words, this isn't a one-off. This is clearly a pattern that we saw repeated over 4 years. I think it's probably safe to say we would have seen it over the next 4 years if Kamala Harris had won the 2024 presidential election, which is a terrifying thought. But, these things can't be taken in isolation, can they, Michael? I mean, this seems to me evidence, and I think a lot of people in the MAGA movement would see this as evidence of a deep state, of unaccountable people in the bureaucracy and in the Democratic Party that are actually running the government. And we have what amounts to a figurehead in the form of President Biden himself and would-be President Kamala Harris. Do you see it that way, or is that taking things a little too far?
No, because look, the Democrats in 2024, no Democrat got to vote for president. Harris was selected by the Democrat Party. So all the rank and file voters, they might have chosen Gavin Newsom, they might have chosen somebody else, but they didn't get that opportunity because the elites in the Democrat Party want to run things and they don't care what the rank and file think. And that's pretty obvious what happened with Harris. It's also obvious with Biden if you go back to 2020. He was losing badly after Iowa and New Hampshire. Mayor Pete was in front, and then South Carolina happened, and then they cleared the field. And it's obvious that they bought certain people off. By buying them off, I literally don't mean paying them. They told Mayor Pete, you're never going to win a Senate race in Indiana. You're never going to be elected anything more than South Bend. Why don't you become transportation secretary? They did things like that to clear the field for Biden because they knew they could control Biden. And this is really scary because President Obama to the far left didn't do enough, believe it or not. He moderated some of his views because President Obama cared what the public thought of him. He didn't want to go too far left. Unelected people don't care. They don't care what people think of Biden. Biden was a tool. Biden was something for them to use. Elected people, at the end of the day, care what people think about him. They care about the polls somewhere. And remember, Biden said he was doing great in the polls at the end because they weren't telling him how he was doing. They weren't telling him what he was doing. He thought he was doing great.
So nobody thinks that President Obama was his own man, right? Of course, he ran his own administration. That was something unique, and we hope it stays unique for the rest of American history of the Biden administration. But what's very striking is that Kamala Harris clearly was running not to actually be the president like Obama or Bush or Trump, where they're actually running anything. She was running to be the chief figurehead of this deep state machine. I mean, that's the frightening thing about it. But if we fast forward to, let's say, 2028, and you've got a guy like maybe Gavin Newsom, or in Pennsylvania, Josh Shapiro, or in Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer, likely potential nominees for the Democrat Party running for president. Do you see any of these people as wanting to be another figurehead, or do you think they'd actually want to run their own administration? In other words, I realize we're speculating here, but is this the new state of Democrat politics from 2020 on forever, or is that some unique blip over those last 4 years?
The last time the Democrats had a really, truly open primary was 2008. The machine wanted Hillary, and the establishment wanted Hillary, and Obama beat her. In 2016, Hillary was anointed by Obama, who, remember, made Biden get out of the race. And in 2020, Biden was effectively selected. In 2024, Harris was literally selected. So it could go back to the model of 2008, where it's somewhat an open primary. But on your three people, there's some interesting things to say there. Number one, the Democrat Party has a serious anti-Semitism problem. We hear about all the people who quit DOJ. One of the reasons why they quit and left DOJ is the rank and file Democrat attorneys there would not work to stop anti-Semitism. They said, our job is to go after the police and get consent decrees, other things, but we will not fight anti-Semitism. And it's very debatable whether a Jew could win in a Democratic nomination. What you're seeing in New York City is a real problem. Is it the majority of the Democrat Party? No. Is it a significant portion of the Democrat Party? Yes. There's a number of Congress people like Tlaib and Omar who hate Jews. So there's no way Shapiro could win that nomination. It'd be very difficult for him. Now, Newsom is trying to moderate. So Newsom is trying to triangulate. I don't know where that stands for him. Can a white, good-looking man be a Democrat Party nominee in a party that, cares about diversity, quote, equity, and inclusion? I don't know. So, and Whitmer Whitmer kind of really hurt herself when she was hiding behind binders in that Trump signing ceremony. And she's kind of they like to talk about her, and maybe she'll be a VP candidate because Michigan is very much a swing state, but I really don't see her as there. So the short answer to your question, we don't know. We're speculating, but it's been 20 years since the Democrat bosses did not pick a nominee. And that was 2008 in Obama. Since then, the bosses of the Democrat Party have chosen their nominee.
Yeah, well, and Whitmer has this uncanny resemblance to Cruella de Vil, so there is that too. Changing gears here, let's talk a little bit about the Trump administration, which thank God is the current administration here, and contrast a little bit of the first Trump administration's court victories and the court strategy with what you see going on here in summer 2025.
Well, I think that's a really important thing to talk about the Trump administration court victories, because the Trump administration court victories were still going on during the Biden administration. Keep in mind, we won the Dobbs decision in 2022. That was under Biden, but it was the Trump appointments to the Supreme Court that made that happen. And we should be very clear. It wasn't Reagan. It wasn't the Bushes. It was Trump's people who made that happen.
Who overturned Roe v. Wade. Yes, exactly.
Correct. And then in 23, we had another huge victory. For the movement's always been fighting against, let's have real equality, not affirmative action. Let's have merit. Let's put merit first. In 23, we won the affirmative action case. Again, that was under Biden. This continued in 24 and in 25. The last 4 years, 24, we had the Chevron case, which is a little bit of an inside baseball thing, but it basically said that unelected bureaucrats cannot run the government from agencies. They have to follow the law, and they have to have court oversight. They don't have wide deference to do whatever the heck they want. And then this year, of course, we had many victories for parental rights. We reined in district court judges and nationwide injunctions, et cetera, and religious freedom, too. So the court in the last 4 years has been the best of my lifetime. And that's due to President Trump's appointments in the first term. And, obviously 3 of those years were where Biden was president. So that's pretty amazing stuff what Trump did in his first term. And also Trump did an amazing job in his first term, taking advantage of a rare political mistake Obama made. Obama did not prioritize judges. He left a lot of vacancies on the table. And I want to make sure I get the numbers right. In 4 years, President Trump appointed and confirmed 54 circuit court nominees. In 8 years, Obama did 55.
Wow.
So, and that makes a huge difference. Of course, President Trump also had the 3 Supreme Court appointments we talked about. So Trump really redid the courts in a better way. Now, we're going to talk about district courts here in a second. Now, unfortunately, the Democrats learned they didn't leave vacancies this time like they did the first time. Biden prioritized judges like Trump did. Now, Biden did not do as many circuit court nominees. He only had 45 circuit court nominees and only had 1 Supreme Court nominee, of course. So Biden did not have the effect in 4 years that Trump did, but in a way, he did much more than Obama did because Democrats learned that they have to pay attention to the courts. Now, that brings us to this term. There's a narrative out there that Trump is losing in the courts, and Trump is losing in the district courts. And the reason why is the district courts are a very bipartisan setup. By that I mean the Senate blue strip policy still applies, which means the senators have a right to veto any nominee of Biden's or of Trump's or Obama's or anybody's. So you have to get what's called a blue slip, which is basically a piece of paper from each senator saying, I approve of this nominee. He can go forward. So there's some bipartisan deals. The first people that Trump put through this term were from Florida, first nominees, and Missouri, because we had 2 senators. The 2 senators got together and agreed. Sometimes 2 Republican senators can disagree as well. Maybe one's conservative, one's more moderate. Maybe one cares about judges a lot, one doesn't care as much. So the district court nominees are a very heavy lift and hard for an administration to totally control. A great example is Sonia Sotomayor was technically nominated for the district court by George H.W. Bush. Now, Bush didn't want to nominate her, but the senator from Connecticut at the time was pushing hard for this person, and that's why she got nominated. So there's a lot of game playing in the Senate. It's really inside baseball, D.C. stuff. Trump has done a much better job than others. And like I said, he's getting all the ones he can, like the Missouri and Florida ones, where we have 2 good Republican senators going. Now, the next part, and this is a bigger problem, is the circuit court. We have, and I want to make sure I get these numbers right. Forgive me for looking at my sheet here. We have, where is it? I think it's 29 judges who are eligible for senior status. This means that they range from the age of 66 to 98. And yes, I said 98. That was not a mistake. that are still serving that could retire or take senior status. And senior status is just a term of art. You can be on a few cases, but you are not a sitting judge on a daily basis. So not all those guys are taking it. Why? Because there's a narrative out there that Trump might not appoint the best people. Now, he appointed incredible people his first term, so this is ridiculous. There's one nominee of his first three that is mildly controversial, and that's Mel Bovee. And the reason why he's controversial is because he represented Trump. That's it. And also the fact that Senator Booker, again, senators feel like they control these senators. They do not control the circuit. They do control the district, is very upset because back to anti-Semitism, his nominee for the Third Circuit that he pushed on Biden was rejected on a bipartisan basis. Senator from Nevada on the Democrat side said, I'm not going to vote for this anti-Semite. And Booker is very upset about that. So he went full Spartacus moment in a recent hearing. He led the Democrats in a walkout. He filibustered and everything else. All because his nominee, the guy he liked, who's anti-Semitic, rejected not just by Republicans, but by Democrats as well, was not selected. So they're fighting this kind of stuff. So what we have to do really as a movement is encourage some of our good conservative judges to take senior status. We also have to realize that Trump has done a phenomenal job, literally the best job. I don't care if you're a huge Reagan fan. Reagan gave us Kennedy and O'Connor. I mean,
Yes.
let's hit it out of the park on judges, and we need to let Trump appoint all the ones he can, because when he's gone in 28, we want to have the court as far most conservative, most respecting the rule of law we can. And last, I'll close out in this long, sorry for such a long answer, but I'll close out by saying, contrast what the left has done. KBJ embarrassed herself the last term. And the reason why I say that Justice Jackson embarrassed herself was because she was called out by Sotomayor and by Kagan and by Barrett too. And Barrett called her out in terms that you don't see said. The court is very much, the Queensberry rules of England, where you say things nicely and very legalistically. They went after her because she's trying to become a policymaker. She's not following the law. She's not respecting the law, most importantly. I mean, Kagan, I would never say these things about. Kagan's a liberal, but Kagan respects the court, and she's an honest jurist. KBJ right now looks like a political hack that, should be a staffer for AOC.
Yeah. I mean, Michael, that's stunning to hear a contrast between activist judges and really activist judges is kind of the distinction I'm hearing here.
Right. And that's why it's so important that Trump gets these. I hope if a Democrat comes to office, they'll do more people like Kagan who, again, I don't agree with Kagan most of the time, but I respect her writings from a liberal perspective. Okay. KBJ is not respecting the rule of law. She actually said the court should not be able to enforce a decision that she dissented on. Why Kagan, of all people, pointed out to her, hey, I was in the minority with you. I disagreed with this decision, but the Supreme Court's the law of the land. What are we going to do? We have to enforce the laws that we say. So it was incredible that KBJ didn't. And then Sotomayor called her out for a similar thing. So this is frightening, the kind of judges that we're seeing on the left who don't respect the basics of the rule of law. It'd be like we didn't hear conservative judges saying, hey, I don't like Roe v. Wade, so we're not going to enforce it, or I'll do this injunction against Roe v. Wade. They didn't do that stuff. And yet that's the kind of thing KBJ is advocating for. And that's what we're seeing some of these Democrat district court judges do. So I would say one of the most important reasons to vote Republican is judges, because, like I said, Trump had many victories on judges after he was out of office.
What role does your organization, the Republican National Lawyers Association, play in any of this nomination process?
Right. We work right now. I'm encouraging all our members and any lawyers out there to speak out in judges, and what a great job Trump is doing. Trump, these stats are 2 weeks old, but he'd won 17 out of 19 cases in the Supreme Court. But if you listen to the media, you'd think Trump was, 1 for 18 or something like that. And,
sure.
Amy Coney Barrett was the worst justice ever. Now, 17 out of 19, that means he lost 2, okay? He doesn't hit 100%. He's not going to hit 100%. But we're doing so well. And this is better than any time in our history when we, quote, had a conservative court or a Republican court with Kennedy as a swing vote. I mean, this is great stuff. So our organization is working to publicize Trump's victories. We also have webinars. We just had a webinar last week on the imperial judiciary, which brings up what KBJ wanted to briefly talked about by guys, legal scholars who are much more articulate on this than me, explaining what these judges are doing is wrong, not just from, the conservative legal perspective, but from the legal perspective overall. This is frightening stuff. We cannot have an imperial judiciary. And the left, of course, will talk about things like court packing, et cetera, et cetera. So this is a big fight. So we try to be the home for lawyers in the Republican Party, and lawyers are the guys who talk about judges the most. But I hate to say it, judges have too big of roles in our lives right now, and it'll only get bigger if we end up with a liberal judiciary.
Well, and considering that, let's go back to Justice Jackson. Does she represent a new kind of Supreme Court justice that we can expect, a President Newsom or a President Whitmer or something to appoint? In other words, she seems to be a DEI hire. I mean, a person not chosen because of her credentials, but literally because she's a black woman. Is this the new norm that we can expect in the near future if Democrats control the presidency?
I hope not, but if you have a President AOC, she is singled. Yes, that's what she would do. President Newsom, I mean, maybe he'd be different. I don't know, but yeah, there's a distinct wing of the Democrat Party that loves KBJ and thinks she's doing the right thing, and that's a significant number. It's not a fringe element. I mean, AOC by one poll was leading the 2028 presidential election for Democrats. Now it's very early, but it's frightening that there's that many Democrats that feel that way, and there's also frightening that many Democrats who would agree with KBJ and think she's a great judge. Now, the old school ones, I think some of them are upset. Like Kagan calling out her fellow liberal is pretty unprecedented.
Yeah.
Sotomayor was actually shocking. So we can't say for sure if it's a majority view of the Democrat Party, but it's certainly a view of a substantial part of their base.
Very concerning. I want to go back to something you talked about earlier, Chevron deference. This is not talked enough about, but this is going to be one of the most long-lasting impacts that the Trump administration has on rolling back the federal bureaucracy. I know, for instance, the EPA's authority to regulate greenhouse gas emissions is a major component of all of this that could get rolled back by it. Give us kind of in layman's terms what Chevron deference does and the impact you see over the next generation or so on the effort to roll back the federal bureaucracy.
The problem we have with Chevron deference is it basically made the appointees of the president, so during the Biden administration or the Obama administration, able to interpret it, quote, ambiguous laws, which may really push the envelope because lawyers can argue almost anything's ambiguous. So it made them able to be totally reverse the policy. So if I'm a businessman, for 4 years under Trump, I got good regulations, less regulations. Then without changing a single law, 4 years under President AOC, I'd have very restrictive regulations that would stop me from effectively running my business in different ways. That's not what's intended. And there's a really troubling case right now up in Massachusetts where Congress defunded Planned Parenthood, okay? And a judge said, nope, Congress can't do that. The judge still hasn't given a really good reason, but that's kind of frightening stuff. Now take that in the Chevron deference side. It was unelected bureaucrats saying, hey, we can do whatever we want in our agencies in every 4 years. It's also really bad, but against, you brought up the EPA, which is the worst offender in a lot of ways because the EPA will have really strict, ridiculous rules where you can't use your land for 4 years under a Democrat, and then it'll take a while to undo those regulations under a Republican. But forget about that. Just be a businessman. I want stability. I want to know what the laws are going to. I want to have a 10-year plan. And you can't because every 4 years, depending if the administration changes, you're going to have different rules. Or you have the potential for different rules, I should say.
Yeah, in other words,
ending just stop that because now the law is the law, period. It doesn't change depending on a bureaucrat's interpretation.
So Congress actually has to pass the laws here and not outsource lawmaking authority to these out-of-control agencies, in other words.
Correct. And we should have some stability then, too. So, yes, that's exactly right. But now the scary thing is, like I mentioned, the judge who said, no, Congress said Planned Parenthood's being defunded, but no, we can't have that. I mean, that's why I go back to the judiciary, it being so important.
You even wonder how you would enforce that decision. It's strange. Talking about more of the next 4 years as we play out the rest of this Trump administration, what obstacles do you foresee in his way? And one of the ones in particular I think people are interested in is potential Supreme Court retirements. We hope nobody dies on the court, of course, but, some of them are getting up there in age. Thomas, for instance. Do you foresee any retirements over the next 4 years or so that we would need to fill so we don't replay in reverse the situation that Obama found himself in with Ginsburg not retiring and then dying in office when Trump came in and helped pave the way for a Republican majority in there? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, that's a fear of the conservative movement, and I understand it's a relevant fear. Thomas and Alito are having a lot of fun right now. I think maybe that's not the way I should say it, but it's really nice to get these great accomplishments done. And Alito and Thomas have been there a long time fighting, and they're winning now a lot of the time, and they're having a big effect. The speculation, and this is purely speculation, is Alito may consider getting out. The attacks on his wife are really hard. His wife does not like DC because of all, the flag controversy and other stuff. Are you kidding me? She should be able to fly whatever flag in front of her house she wants. But, so there's a chance that Alito may get out in 26 or 27. Thomas is running on, has a chance to be the longest serving justice in Supreme Court history. So if I had the chance to do that, I think, yes. So if he stays around to the 28 term or the 27 term, he would be the longest serving justice in history. And I think Thomas would like that record. And you know what? Thomas has been one of the most impactful justices in our history. I think it's really great for him because too many scholars dismissed him as, Scalia's, and Scalia was a great justice. Don't get me wrong on that at all. But as a Scalia clone, he was not. He's his own person with his own philosophy, and he's had a profound effect on the court. So I think it'd be great if he did that. But with my movement hat on, I'd like them both to consider retiring sooner. Especially why, Senate control matters. If we lose a Senate seat, as every president almost has done, except for 2022 and 2002 in the Senate in the midterms, it may be tougher to confirm a good nominee. So it would be better if they can consider retiring next year, but I don't necessarily think that'll happen for Thomas. And Alito, who knows?
Let's go back about 23 years to when you joined RNLA in 2002, if I have that correct. It seems to me that everything you've described, especially with these district circuit court battles, I don't know that was in place 25 years ago, certainly not 45 years ago here. How has the judicial landscape evolved? Because this seems like an extension of the kind of partisan politics in the culture war that we're all very familiar with now in 2025. Was it that bad in 2002? Have things evolved? Have they devolved, perhaps?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Historically, there was the Bork nomination, which was the first time a Supreme Court nominee really got fought. Then there was the Thomas nomination. And if you look at Thomas and Kavanaugh, they're very similar in what the Democrats did. Thomas got through the hearing fine. And then after the hearing was, quote, done, they brought home this woman who accused him of something that turned out to be groundless. It was almost a mirror of what happened to Kavanaugh. Kavanaugh got through the hearing, and then this woman came forward with an allegation that in a case of Blasey Ford, all her witnesses were on Kavanaugh's side. In the case of Anita Hill, she followed Thomas around for years after that, and she wasn't credible. Biden originally said she wasn't credible. So in both those cases, they did the same thing to those Supreme Court justices. But putting aside that, in 2002, the game did change. The Democrats realized that Bush was appointing conservative people to the court, and they started to filibuster circuit court nominees for the first time. This was unprecedented. It had never happened to a circuit court nominee ever. They had something called the Leahy-Thurman rule, which meant in August of an presidential election year, you don't let nominees go forward. But besides that, circuit court nominees were always voted on. They always got, up or down, usually confirmed. Obviously, they're not very controversial. But then the Democrats started filibustering nominees, and not just filibustering them because this was the old rules, it blocking them effectively. You could not get a vote on these guys. And one of the first ones to be filibustered was Miguel Estrada. And it came out through papers obtained that then Senator Kennedy of Massachusetts, Teddy Kennedy, the liberal lion, and a young senator named Dick Durbin were in part blocking Estrada because they did not want the first Hispanic on the Supreme Court, because he was nominated for the D.C. Circuit and he's an absolutely brilliant lawyer, to be a conservative Hispanic. They wanted to be a liberal Hispanic, which happened years later with Sotomayor. So they won that battle because they effectively blocked him. And that went on for 3 years. Hilariously, at RNLA, we had a policy conference way back in 2003 where we had this young White House counsel address us about the terrible treatment of the nominees like Miguel Estrada and a D.C. Circuit nominee at the time named John Roberts, who later, of course, became the Chief Justice, the terrible treatment that these circuit court nominees were getting. Of course, that person received much worse treatment because his name was Brett Kavanaugh many years later. But it was a good start of things. that became really bad. So yeah, from 2002 on, you're right on 23 years. I started in 2000, but 2002 was when the fight really began on these nominees. And Democrats are now taking this even further. Now the filibuster rules have changed. You now can get a judge through quicker, but it's still, you can get them through, I should say. It still takes times, and there's, we can talk forever about Senate parliamentarian rules and stuff, but they're trying to block all nominees. They're trying to keep the government from effectively running, which is ironic for a party of government. So this is a problem we face, but it makes the judicial confirmation fight worth having and important because, like I said, these judges are going to affect things after Trump is out of office.
So equally important to that is the fight over election integrity. So I know your organization, RNLA, is deeply involved in training thousands of lawyers to watch the polls, the places where they're counting ballots. This was a big problem in 2020. I mean, amidst many, many problems, we didn't have enough conservative lawyers in the battleground states, in the offices, watching people count ballots, and we're aware of it. And it was a travesty. That changed in 2024. I think that was one of the biggest signal shifts in those 4 years as conservatives started to wake up to the problems of election insecurity. What was RNLA's role in all of that? And what difference do you think it actually made from 2020 to 2024?
Oh, it made a huge difference. And let me just say, 2020 was the worst election. I've been involved in elections since 1996, and 2020 was by far the worst election. And what happened in 2020 was the Democrats are at war against transparency. I mean, I like to say we were for open, fair, and honest elections, but if you really want to boil it down, we want transparency. And in 2020, under the guise of COVID, Democrats ran the least transparent election in history. A good example I recently went to Wisconsin for a Supreme Court election to observe that in Milwaukee. And I can tell you the difference between 2020 and 2025. In 2020, the election officials made us stand 50 feet away because of, quote, COVID. Now, nobody was talking that COVID needed to be 50 feet away. It was 6 feet, right?
Yes, of course.
Not 50, but they said 50 feet away. Then they also effectively blocked us. We bought binoculars so we could still observe, but nope. They would stand up and block the view of our binoculars. They did not want the election to be observed. Now, let's fast forward to 2025, which also applied in 2024 because we had people in Milwaukee Central count. We were able to observe things. And we watched one particular election official who wanted to let ballots count that were mail ballots that obviously shouldn't count. They didn't meet the very minimal requirements. And we were there to flag for the supervisor, hey, we don't think this one should count. The supervisor agreed with us. And this lady would run around and try to lose our observers because when our observers were behind her, she knew she had to follow the law. When her observer wasn't behind her, if she thought she could shake us, then they would count those ballots. It's just crazy. And that's just one example. And that same night, there was ballots that arrived in late. They knew there was a bunch of Republican lawyers there, so they didn't count those ballots as they shouldn't have counted them. In 2020, who the heck knows what happened? We weren't in that room. I mean, we're 50 feet away from everything. We couldn't tell anything what was going on. So, and that's the thing too. The myth of election integrity is, Republicans are trying to do something, intimidate election. No, we're not. We're trying to get the law enforced. And I would love it if I had a Democrat lawyer next to every one of my Republican lawyers, because I want both sides to feel confident in the result.
Sure.
I want transparency. In 2020, under the guise of COVID, we had absolutely no transparency. And, Philadelphia was worse than what I described in Milwaukee. At least we were 50 feet away and could maybe catch a glimpse of something. Philadelphia, we couldn't see anything. They really just kicked us out. And that was a big problem. So what we do is we fight for transparency. What we do is we fight to observe. What I'm talking about now is the central count of mail ballots, but there's other things we do as well, such as a call center where we take in calls from various poll watchers. We track issues and such. And another great example, the difference from 2020 to 2021, this is kind of where the line is, because sometimes it's hard to say when the incompetence and the fraud begins. You run a massive election one day every 2 years or every 4 years. It's tough to do everything right, especially when your employees are usually, seasoned citizens, let's say. But anybody, I don't care if you and I did a job once every 2 years, I'm not sure we'd be great at it. It takes a while to get good at your job. So anyways, in 2021 in Virginia, we're still under the COVID rules, but now we were able to fight back a little bit. And they made a rule, the local election officials, because in Virginia, I should add, most polling places are in schools. And in 2021, because of the governor of Virginia, Democrat at that time, schools, you had to wear masks. And because students are not good at following rules, there's a sign every 4 feet saying, wear your mask, whatever, Tigers or whatever your school name is, Bruins, whatever. And so there was two kinds of election officials that we ran into this problem. One kind was, hey, I'm a mom. I pick my kid up here from school every day. I have to wear a mask every time I go inside. It's the rules. Well, actually, it wasn't the rules. For an election, you don't need to wear a mask. So they were forcing the mask requirement maybe because they just didn't know, because that's the rules of the school. Nothing. So we were able to inform them that, no, that's not the law for elections. But there was another kind. The other kind was like, let's see, Democrat voters come on with 2 masks on into the polling place. Republican voters come with Gadsden flag shirts, say I'm not wearing no stinking mask, something like that. And they say they're not going to wear masks. It was a great way to suppress our vote. It was terrible. But we got a bunch of calls in the call center. We were able to go to election officials. Oh, it's only happening in 1 or 2 polling places. We're like, no, here's 10 different ones across the state. You need to do something about this. You need to do a bulletin. And he did a statewide bulletin saying to all election officials, you don't need a mask to vote. And Governor Youngkin, then candidate Youngkin, actually blasted that out too as a get out the vote strategy. Hey, they're trying to force you to wear masks. You don't have to. So it was a win-win for integrity when the Democrats were trying to suppress our vote. And there's something like this that happens somewhere in the country, somehow every election cycle, and lawyers are good at spotting the problems, putting those problems together, and then dealing with them. And, I can give other examples. We're at the registrar's office and other things like that as well.
Yeah. And, putting that together, you can't do that in 30 days before an election. I mean, that's real infrastructure. It's kind of an extension of campaign infrastructure now that I think about it. So how long in advance did you have to prepare this for? And, I imagine, will it be in place for the 2026 midterms?
Yes. And depending on the state. Look, I don't work in states like Idaho or Hawaii. So anybody listening who signs up for us, we're not going to deploy you to Hawaii because Republicans aren't going to win in Hawaii. And elections, more importantly, aren't probably going to be close in Hawaii. Same thing in reverse in Idaho. I don't think elections are going to be very close in Idaho. So that's number one. That's one thing we work on there. What was the other part of your question? I'm sorry.
Will this be set up in 2026? And how far in advance do you have to prepare people and train these volunteers?
Yeah, that's very state dependent. That's why I started out with that example. So Virginia has 45 days of early voting.
Yes.
45. I mean, it's just ridiculous. So we have to be prepared all 45 days. And you just can't flick the switch on day one. You have to train people. You have to organize people. You have to find who can be there and who can help. So we need to begin before that. And we full year-round recruit people. Like any lawyers watching this, go to rnla.org and sign up. And get us on your list or send us an email, and we'll get you into the system. We'll try to help you work on making elections transparent. And it's a fun thing for lawyers to do because I hate to say this, I'm going to slam my profession. You don't really want a guy in a Brooks Brothers suit and expensive tie going door to door. We're much better doing this behind the scenes. So.
Sure. Yeah, well, I love going to Milwaukee for my free time too. Yes, I get it. So as we close out here talking more about this, election integrity has come a very long way since November 2020. I mean, that's when I noticed the problems with things like Zuckerbucks and all these related issues with mail-in ballots and such. Here we are 5 years later, we're in Virginia in particular, we're entering into a major governor's race, which is really the beginning of election season for the midterms, for a lot of us who pay attention to this stuff year in and year out. Where do we go from here as a party, as a movement when it comes to election integrity? There's been a lot of success through the Trump administration, through a lot of conservative states. Governor Youngkin, who did win in 2021, thanks to some of your work there, has done a lot to secure the ballots in our state. What do you see as the major remaining obstacles to that? What are people not paying attention to that they really ought to know so that we can continue to clean up our elections and have transparency like we ought to?
That's a great point. We need to continue to work to clean up our elections. In Virginia, even though we have a Democrat legislature, we were able to get a Zuckerbuck ban.
Yes.
We can do things even in states like, voter ID is universally popular. We can do that in even California. I mean, my hometown in California, in Huntington Beach, has a voter ID provision. So there are things we can try to do. I mean, it's a heavy lift to get it statewide because the courts will fight in California, but there are things we can do to make it better. That's one. Number two is there's a desperate need for poll workers. Now, I need to be clear, it's poll workers. Some states have different names. So all your viewers here, whether lawyers or just regular citizens can sign up to be poll workers. That's the best thing we can have, is people in the polls, working on the polls, observing the process. Transparency is great. They're not going to do as many bad things, or not going to do bad things if they see, there's a good Republican there among the Democrat workers. That's the best thing we can do. So everybody can do that to a certain extent. Of course, the Democrats fight that. We had to fight in places like Michigan and Nevada to get a lot of number of Republicans in, but that's much better than poll watching. Poll watching is kind of sexy. Everybody talks about it, but it's not as good as being a poll worker. And then the next thing is, if you're a lawyer, obviously sign up with me at RNLA.org and we'll get you plugged in, because like I said, lawyers are good at doing this. So I guess it's three things. One, there are legislative changes you can do, even in the bluest of blue states. Obviously, a blue state is not going to be as good as a red state, but everybody can improve their elections. And I should add, the Democrats are always coming up with new ideas. Their current idea is ranked choice voting, which is just a goofy system to disenfranchise our own voters in the primary. So we need to fight those new ideas. We need to be constantly vigilant and examine these ideas and not listen to the hype and figure out where they are. Two, everybody can volunteer to be a poll worker. We need good poll workers there. And three, if you're a lawyer, I can make sure you're plugged into the right system the right way. So we need to keep fighting year-round on legislation. We need to fight election season on poll workers, and then sign up with me at rnla.org.
Michael Thielen, appreciate your insights. I'm Hayden Ludwig, and this is Restoration Spotlight, a project of Restoration News, your source of headline-smashing investigative journalism for the America First movement. Check us out at restoration-news.com. Until next time, stay vigilant and trust in God.